Hello everyone, I'm Addison Smith. Welcome to In Focus. Before we start the show today, I just want to remind you that exactly 1 year ago to date, President Joe Biden, as he routinely does, lied about getting American citizens evacuated from Afghanistan.
Americans should understand that troops might have to be there beyond August 31st.
No, Americans should understand that we're going to try to get it done before August 31st.
But if we don't, the troops will stay.
If we don't, we'll determine at the time who's left.
And
if there are American forces, if there's American citizens left, we're going to stay till we get them all out.
If there are American citizens left, we are going to stay until we get them all out. After the Biden withdrawal, more than 1,000 Americans were left behind. The State Department went back and were able to rescue a few hundred, but there are still several hundred citizens needlessly stranded in Afghanistan under Biden's watch. Just wanted to throw that out there. Meanwhile, the numbers are in. Speaking of numbers, Joe Biden and Democrats have spent $3.8 trillion on their agenda wish list since the president's inauguration. $3.8 trillion since January of 2021. And what have we gotten in return? 40-year high inflation that's outpacing wages, double the price in gas, double-digit percentage hikes in countless grocery items, a higher cost of living, a drastically higher cost of living, less money in your savings, and a recession. In other words, Biden has wasted $3.8 trillion effectively, almost entirely. None of his spending packages are going towards fulfilling the needs of Americans. They're going towards arming the IRS, fighting the sun monster, and cutting Vladimir Zelensky a sweet paycheck while he tries making deals with America's #1 foreign enemy, the CCP. They have spent this whole time claiming to save our economy, and our economy hasn't been in this bad of shape in years. Now, you might say President Trump spent a lot of money too, and he did. He spent trillions of dollars. Well, that's true, but first of all, Biden is far outpacing Trump in spending. He's already spent hundreds of billions more than Trump spent in his entire 4-year term. But second of all, Trump didn't fail to deliver to the American people. Trump didn't put us in a recession. Trump didn't give us record inflation. He gave us one of the strongest economies we've had in recent memory. He gave us $1.86 gas, energy independence. So obviously Trump was no fiscal conservative, but he did conserve the hell out of our economy in spite of his heavy spending. Biden is spending more than Trump did, and his spending packages are going towards the destruction, not conservation, of our economy. The American Rescue Plan that has not rescued anybody, Biden's so-called infrastructure bill that didn't even have half to do with infrastructure, and the Inflation Reduction Act that has nothing to do with reducing inflation. Biden spent us into a recession. That's the glaring, obvious difference here. And the recession will only worsen with the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, which, speaking of, I want to play this clip from RNC Research because it's worth pointing out the number of Democrats who have warned against raising taxes during a recession before turning right around and passing a bill that raises taxes during a recession.
The last thing you want to do is to raise taxes in the middle of a recession.
When the economy is in decline, you don't want to raise overall taxes.
I don't think during a time of recession you mess with any of the taxes or increase any taxes.
No one is going to want to raise taxes when we have a recession.
In an economy like this, the last thing we should do is raise taxes on the middle class.
I mean, just a few short years ago, they sounded like Republicans. Isn't that something? When Democrats are not getting to spend your money, they played the fiscal responsibility game. But the second they get to dip their hands into your pocket, it's a different story. Which brings us to this from Fox Business. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Wednesday asked the IRS to develop an operational plan for deploying the $80 billion in new funding allocated to it under the Democrats' healthcare and climate change spending package. Yellen laid out her top priorities in the memo, a copy of which was obtained by Fox Business, which included clearing a backlog of unprocessed tax returns, modernizing IRS technology, improving taxpayer services, and hiring at least 50,000 new employees over the next 5 years. Joining me now to react to all of this is the Dean of Liberty University School of Business and Economic Advisor to Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, Dr. Dave Brat. Dr. Brat, it's great to have you on the show. Let's start with Biden's spending spree. $3.8 trillion is a lot of money to spend only to get us into a recession.
Right. Yeah, and you started strong on what's at stake there is how do you have that much stimulus and then end up in a recession, right? That's the part that makes you scratch your head. And so the only way that can happen is if your productivity is a disaster, and it is. If you go Google the latest productivity stats, they're down. And Robert Gordon at Northwestern is the best in the world on productivity. And U.S. productivity has been going down for 40 years in a row. And that's the most important economic variable, right? That's the amount of stuff you make per hour. And that in macroeconomics is the equivalent of the income you're going to make per hour. So that is down right now as well. Real wages, especially after inflation, are down. And so, yeah, at in the last administration, we had high school wage workers, real wages and income going up for the first time in 40 years. Because there was more of an emphasis on the supply side of the economy, in getting jobs back from China, getting manufacturing jobs back. So now it's the White House is pointing to jobs reports over and over. And it is true. The labor market stats are coming out looking strong in terms of the number of workers. But how can you possibly have huge numbers of workers and less output? And so it reminds me of one of Milton Friedman, right? If your young scholars out there don't know who Milton Friedman is, go to YouTube and watch him. He's one of the best economists in the world prior to this latest political craziness. He says, if you want to increase jobs, all you got to do is have people dig ditches with teaspoons, right? That'll significantly increase the number of workers you have. And you see the farce right away, right? So you got millions of people working, digging ditches with teaspoons, and nothing gets done. And you don't have any real output, which is what you care about. You don't care about jobs. You care about the productivity of those jobs. And so that's what this country has to get back at. Right now, 1/5 of our economy is targeted to healthcare through Obamacare, run through the federal government. Now the environment is the latest crazy fun trend. Turns out to be totally unproductive. It has all sorts of unmitigated, unexpected economic downfalls. And the energy sector is upside down, right? Energy and environment kind of go together. But there are productive ways of cleaning up the environment and not ruining your economy simultaneously. And so on net, the key is we've got to return back to the private sector. And then at the end, you mentioned Yellen and the Federal Reserve. And I mentioned Cato the other day on another news piece. Go out to Cato Journal, volume 43 on modern monetary policy. And the far left loves this stuff, right? AOC and these folks. And the reason they love it is because all monetary policy under that new theory should fall underneath the federal government as well. It will become a part of fiscal policy where central command up in D.C. and the swamp will command and restructure the entire economy, not following business logic like in the old days when the Fed made money, right? You gave a loan out to a real business and the business had to be profitable. Not anymore. You just do quantitative easing, throw money out there by the trillions, right? 8 trillion on the Fed balance sheet right now. And you hope it sticks to a business. And it's not. And it's kind of like China right now, right? They're throwing money out there, more and more high rises, and they're tearing them down the next year. So it's not good across the board.
Well, and you talked about restructuring, and the IRS is doing just that at their agency right now. Janet Yellen's own words that it allows for a monumental opportunity to reshape the tax collecting agency. I discussed yesterday on the show, the IRS was having a training session where they were having IRS agents, recruits, holding their guns at people with their backs turned, hands up. They're practicing using lethal force and killing people because, I don't know, maybe they had a garage sale and they didn't report it on their W-2. Maybe they Venmo'd their buddy for an Airbnb and didn't put it on their W-2. That's what the IRS is gearing up to do right now. And you have Democrats, we already know Biden lied when he said you're not going to see a penny difference in your taxes if you make under $400,000 a year. We know this is going to impact people making $200,000 a year, $100,000 a year, even less than that. And so what do you make of this weaponization of the IRS and them even saying that we have a great opportunity to transform this agency?
Yeah, well, what I think is our founders had it right. The federal government was supposed to be the last resort, right? If you can't do it in your local community, then go to your local government. If you can't get it done in your local, then you go to state. And if you really can't get it done, like national defense, right? And then you go to the federal government. Now everybody's learned that to get your hands on $1 billion, you send your lobbyists up to D.C. and you enhance the role and scope of the federal government. And it's very interesting. The messaging coming out of the left has to do with fascism, right? And, the lack of democracy. I don't know what they mean by democracy. I hope they still mean just people voting. But fascism can only come about with a big federal government, right? Hitler, Mussolini, Italy, etc. Go look at the fascist regimes. And so, this doesn't have to be partisan. If you don't like what's going on right now, everybody needs to vote for a smaller federal government. If you want to tax yourself at the local level and plant flowers in the medians of the highway, great. That's America, right? You do whatever you want, right? At the local level, fine. It's no threat. And if you don't like it, you move to another locality. And state, still somewhat the logic holds, right? You still got mobility. You vote with your feet. But once we do it at the Fed, you're stuck. You have to listen to the central commanders. And if you disagree with them, they silence you these days. So it's getting scary.
Yeah. Real quick, Dr. Brat, we are almost out of time, but I can't not play this clip. Liz Cheney announcing that she is thinking about running for president. I have to play it. Let's roll the tape.
The former president said last night you're now headed to political oblivion. You said this fight is just beginning. You've even launched a political organization already. So let's just be straight about it. Are you considering running for president yourself?
Well, what I'm going to do, Savannah, is spend the next several months completing my work in Congress, obviously completing my work representing the people of Wyoming. We have a tremendous amount of work left to do on the January 6th committee. And also, though, I'm going to be making sure that people all around this country understand the stakes of what we're facing, understand the extent to which we've now got one major political party, my party, which has really become a cult of personality. And we've got to get this party back to a place where we're embracing the values and the principles on which it was founded, and talking about, fundamental issues of civics, fundamental issues of what does it mean to be a constitutional republic.
But Congresswoman, you didn't answer me yes or no.
It takes to keep Donald Trump. I will be doing whatever it takes to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office.
Well, I know you didn't say yes or no, and that's fine if you're thinking about it. But are you thinking about it? Are you thinking about running for president?
That's a decision that I'm going to make in the coming months, Savannah. I'm not going to make any announcements here this morning, but it is something that I'm thinking about, and I'll make a decision in the coming months.
There it was, right at the end. She gets blown out by over 60,000 votes in Wyoming, but hey, maybe the rest of the country will like her. I'm not too sure about that.
Yeah, no, what you don't hear is any commentary on the major issues of the day. Yeah. And on a promise to downsize the role of the federal government from her or many people in either party. That's what the American people, they want real solutions. What's the energy policy to get my gas prices down? The open borders crushing me and the competitive wages. What are we going to do with China? Are we going to do more deals and send them more chips like we're currently doing, computer chips from Taiwan and South Korea, and our allies are sending China defense weapon chips? And the American people just scratch their head at this stuff, and they don't hear anything that makes sense from these folks. And so democracy will settle it, right? We'll have some elections, and we'll see what the American people want.
Yeah. Principled Republican Liz Cheney, who endorsed Joe Biden and has made her claim to fame off of trying to keep a Republican out of the White House. Principled conservative Liz Cheney. Dr. Dave Brat, it's great to have you on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Addison. Great to be on. Great job.